Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
That is not what I expected tonight at all. I am so disappointed in what we witnessed. The lack of effort was brutal, and they got absolutely destroyed in that second half where they did not show up to compete whatsoever. When Doc Rivers is begging them at the end during the broadcast where he's looking at everybody's face when he's on the bench, and he's begging them to go out there and play harder. I mean, what are we talking about here? Professional athletes in Game 6 on their home floor fighting for their lives with their back against the wall. They really weren't fighting for their lives, but just from a hypothetical world, right here you are with the chance to push this to 7, go on the road and give yourself a fighter's chance, a flip of a coin, and they just looked miserable, and it's so damn disappointing when you're so desperate that you have to rely on Shake Milton to bring you some life, and you're running your squad through him a bit, trying to get him to be an energizer late in the game. Come on, dude. What are we talking about? A second half, a fourth quarter in a postseason series? That's the reason why you brought in James Harden. That's the reason why you made the trade to move on from Ben Simmons and to acquire somebody else so you could be, you know, in a fighter's chance here. And instead, you just looked awful. So, I mean, I know that there's been games in the past where I lost my cool and I was so pissed off that my face turned red and it was nonstop screaming into the microphone as loud as humanly possible as I watched the Phillies take a nice 4-0 lead here against the Dodgers in Game 1. Hey, it's baseball season now, so here we go. But all jokes aside, you know, I am pissed, but I'm more just looking at it from a disgraceful standpoint that they were not prepared to play, and specifically James Harden. You shoot 0 for 2 in the second half. The second shot came when the game was basically over and you were already ran out the damn gym. So really, he was non-existent in the second half whatsoever. Now, post-game, you heard his comments about he's going to be here next year and he's willing when it comes to the contract extension to help out the team to put them in a position to compete at the highest level possible. I don't know what Daryl Morey is going to do. I'm very glad that I'm not in his shoes because this is a very difficult task. And here's what I won't do, though, because tonight is Hot Take City. I've seen the worst takes I've ever seen, and that's saying a lot because Twitter and social media in 2022 is arguably the worst time in history when it comes to sports opinions. So I've been hearing things all over the map, from fans to media members to local reporters, and the list goes on and on. I've heard that this team is stuck in purgatory, and they're stuck in the same exact spot they were before the process even began. You're an idiot. That is not the case at all. Now, I'm disappointed that we're in this position. I want to see an Eastern Conference Finals series. I need to see them advance from the second round, and they are absolutely stuck. You talk about losing in 7 games with Ben Simmons. Talk about losing the quadruple doink on the road Game 7 against the Toronto Raptors, the eventual champions who won the Larry O'Brien that year. And now a Game 6 loss at home after missing Joel Embiid due to injuries in the first 2 games, and who knows how it plays out if he wasn't playing with a broken face, a torn ligament in his thumb, his back that he's landing on nonstop, and that's not his fault. Don't say he's not doing his job and he needs to learn. No, Joel Embiid's doing fine out there, and he's giving you everything he had. This is just what happens when you are playing through this and people get hurt all the time. Jimmy Butler missed 30 regular season games, rounding it up, but around 30 games, played 50. I'll get it right for you for all the people that, you know, want to criticize me when it comes to this. Let's see. Jimmy Butler played 57 games this year. Or this was 20. Is this count as the 2021 season? I hate when they do that. It's 2021-22. 57 games this year, 52 last season. The guy's been banged up. Now, he's balling, and he turned this series around big time for himself, and he exploded. Talk about 40 points. Talk about 30-plus. I mean, it honestly feels at times that my man is shooting 100% from the field, specifically from the two-point line and in, for two-point field goals, that is. It just seems like he never misses, and he's always outworking everybody, and it is what it is. But guys get hurt all the time. Kyle Lowry, not even there for you. The difference difference is the Miami Heat have guys that are stepping up while the Sixers are dealing with George Niang. Danny Green goes out, and that looks horrible. I feel so sorry for him because that looked like a painful one this deep into his career to suffer such a horrible-looking injury. And just the way that Woj is tweeting about it and saying that there's some scared feelings out there about how severe it is when we're talking about the MRI, it looked brutal. But this stuff happens when you're out there playing the sport of basketball. Here's what I won't do. Say that they are stuck in the same spot as they were before the process. We're talking about game 7s in the second round. We're talking about game 6 in the second round. This isn't acceptable, and you need to find a way to get over this hump. But to act as if they are in the same spot as they were with Iguodala, I mean, come on now. Let's use our senses a little bit better. So let's draw the line perfectly with all of these reactions. I'm hearing Joel Embiid is a problem. Joel Embiid is a loser. Yet those same people say Jimmy Butler's a winner. I love Jimmy Butler, and I think he's a dog, but he has not won yet. So he's labeled a winner. And oh, by the way, after the game, Jimmy Butler states, I want to play with Joel Embiid. I wish I could still be playing with Joel, even though afterwards he goes, I love being here with the Miami Heat, but I wish I could keep playing with them because I love them. So let me get this straight. Joel Embiid is the issue as the leader, yet Jimmy Butler's a winner. Joel Embiid cannot be labeled a winner. And then the guy who you label is the winner wants to be playing with Joel Embiid because he knows how much of a dog he is and how great he is at his craft. Yet we're not going to factor that into the equation whatsoever. If your take is Joel gave up and Joel got out rebounded during a slow-mo of an ESPN broadcast and you don't think that he's tough enough here, then whatever. You have your own possible outlets. You utilize those personal outlets to get out those feelings. I completely disagree. I watched a Joel Embiid that was getting triple-teamed and double-teamed by Eric Spoelstra in the Miami Heat when he's playing so damn banged up, it's nearly impossible to be fighting through the pain that he is. And he's out there giving you everything. Are there a couple moments that I'm sure he would like to have back where someone out-rebounded him when the score was getting out of whack a little bit? Yes. He wasn't perfect by any means. But if we're going to nitpick and just look at the couple of areas that disappoint you and not look at the full body of work of what Joel Embiid does, well then shame on you. Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and Shake Milton, I acknowledge all of their efforts in this outing. They gave you everything they possibly could have in the tank. That doesn't mean Tyrese Maxey does everything perfectly, but in terms of playing the game out there with the right mindset of, I'm going to leave everything I have. What I have for you in Game 6 is everything I have. I'm leaving it all out there. That's the difference. There's a difference between that and making and missing your shots and scoring a bunch of points. They just gave you everything they had in the tank, and at this point, it wasn't enough to go up against a Jimmy Butler that was accomplishing their goal. You could see the difference in the thinness of the team. Tobias Harris came back to himself a little bit after exploding earlier in this postseason. And when I looked at the beginning of the series, I was a little wrong thinking and kind of demanding Tobias Harris to be sharper than what he was. He folded. James Harden, though, he's the number one culprit here of we went to get you. And the fact that you have 2 total shots in the second half and Shake Milton finished with 8 field goals. James Harden had 9. That's inexcusable. That's unacceptable. And I don't want to hear that we were running the ball around and passing it around and it just didn't get back to me. You need to find the fine line between being a facilitator and trying to get everybody else involved and then also helping out your team when needed. You evaporated. You pulled a Ben Simmons. How many times did we stress that Ben Simmons wasn't even there? He was non-existent in fourth quarters, not even taking shots in fourth quarters, just standing underneath the basket, doing absolutely nothing. And that's exactly what went through with James Harden today. He did absolutely nothing for you. And I don't know how that's humanly possible, even with hamstring injuries. I'm sure that's limiting him. And he even mentioned that during the postgame, which was he was having problems with his hamstring over the last couple of years, and he hasn't really felt right yet. And now he's finally turning the corner of feeling a little bit better, which is ironic considering this is the outing that he puts on display on the table when you just mentioned how it seems like you're kind of getting your groove back when it comes to your body. Here's my point. Joel Embiid, look at what he's doing through all of his physical ailments, taking all these shots, and some of them are ill-advised, okay? But at this point, the Miami Heat with, okay, anyone but Joel. Because Niang stinks. Because Tobias wasn't going well. Because James Harden was not going downhill and not being aggressive and not willing to shoot. So, of course, take Joel Embiid out and try and get him out of whack because no one else is going to deliver for them. I'm watching triple teams to a man that has a broken face, concussed, landing on his back, tripping over his own feet. And stop with the foolishness that this is Joel Embiid's problem and he's a dope for playing this way. Come on, man. How can you honestly watch the game and feel like that's your assessment out there? He's clearly giving you everything that he has in his body right now. He's a real human going through real physical pain, and this is what he gave you. If you don't see that, God bless your soul. God bless your soul. I want to hear from Joel Embiid after the game. I heard from Doc, which had some clueless things stated. Doc literally says, no one expected us to go anywhere when I was hired. Doc, what are you talking about? Okay? In what universe were you not brought in to try and get them past what their recent issues were at the time? Brett Brown wasn't getting the job done. They were getting stuck in the second round. So they brought you in, a proven winner, to take a stride in the right direction. Now, to be fair, I don't think they lost this series because of Doc Rivers. I have issues with some of his decision-making. For example, when you go to DeAndre Jordan to start the series without Joel, that sucks, and that's stupid. At the same time, Paul Reed would have picked up 5 fouls in 15 minutes, and then he would have had to use someone else. You weren't winning games with Bassey and Reed and changing this series around. It just wasn't going to be the case. Doc Rivers didn't lose you this series. He didn't win you this series either, but I don't think he had the chance to win you this series when you're forced to run Matisse Thybulle, who blows offensively. I mean, this guy cannot play basketball on the offensive side of the floor. So you got to yank him out. When Danny Green goes down, it was going to be a grind, an uphill battle to try and get your offense finding the open looks because of just what Danny Green, the player, does to the opposing defense. Matisse Thybulle's closest defender was basically touching the paint when he was hanging out by the corner, and they were daring him to shoot the basketball because they knew he was going to miss and he was going to be far off, and that's the case to the point where you had to get him off the floor. So you go to Shake Milton. But even more of Shake Milton or more of other guys, it doesn't matter. You just didn't have the answers on your roster. As you saw, that whatever guy got his number called, while I acknowledge that Shake had some life to the party tonight, I mean, a full body of work of Shake Milton, it doesn't matter. You don't have the option. So he didn't win it for you, but I don't know how many coaches win you a series when your players shoot as poorly as they do. Niang, when was Niang's last points? I can't even remember. Was I 6? I'm 27 this month, by the way. Was I 6 the last time he contributed? See, I'm waiting for the big man. I'm waiting for his comments. I have no idea what Doc was saying there. No one expected us to go anywhere. Yes, we did. Yes, we did, Doc. That's foolish. I did not mind him going after Howard Eskin a little bit, though. And he was right to also bring up the Jimmy Butler side of things. We love Jimmy Butler. The NBA world loves his work ethic and his attitude. He hasn't won. It's damn hard to win. But you can't go to the extreme and make it seem like we should all be satisfied by not getting out of the second round once again. And by the way, the last 2 games, showing up with this type of effort. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Doc Rivers has to inspire players at the NBA level like he's a U16 coach that's at the local gym, because that's not the job of NBA head coaches. You inspire yourself. If you can't inspire yourself, there's a problem. There were a couple guys that were not inspired the last couple of nights. I prefaced this by saying Joel Embiid, I don't think it's the lack of Joel Embiid being inspired. I think my man is finally being caught up with everything that he's dealing with from a physical ailment standpoint. I think that's the number one problem why we saw the Joel Embiid that we saw. He's not perfect. He does have moments where like, all right, Joe, I wish you did it a little bit different. But that's everyone in every single job ever. You just want to pretend like you're playing NBA 2K where you get hurt, but you play, we're going to battle through the injury by selecting the A button, and then your computer-generated player is fine and giving you 40 points. No. Imagine trying to do anything with a thumb that's torn. And then imagine it being the NBA postseason. It's a problem. It's a problem. So Maxey, Shake, and Joel, those guys kind of get off for the effort here, in terms of screaming at the team for not showing up. They were there. But James Harden not being there, that's a James Harden problem. Tobias, the last couple of nights, part of it is he is who he is, and that's part of the Tobias Harris experience. At the same time, these are the biggest moments. And you guys showed up big time and were just not a factor whatsoever. And that's so damn problematic. Every year, you look at other teams' benches, and then you look at the Sixers bench. The Sixers bench have arguably guys that shouldn't even be in the damn league. It's time to figure out how you can get deeper, where your sixth man could arguably be your starter. Your sixth man this year cannot arguably be your starter. Shake Milton is not an NBA starter. Matisse Thybulle, he does in this team, in this city, but he's not an NBA starter. Your sixth man has to be, your first guy off the bench has to be an argument that he can actually start, and he can take over certain situations. A secondary, primary ball handler. I love Maxey. The Maxey story is incredible. You need a real point guard, a real backup point guard, knowing that James Harden is going to be here. So that's where we're at. He did not match the intensity. The rebounding, you hear the oohs and the ahs from the crowd because it was second chance opportunities. James Harden to start that fourth quarter frame with the turnovers. Oh, man, awful. Hear the heavy, heavy boos. The lead big time goes up for Miami. You have to call a timeout. I'm making a cup of coffee. I hear my TV. The way my kitchen is set up, it's 2 feet away from my family room, my living room, whatever the hell you want to call it. So I'm just a couple feet away, and I'm hearing it on the broadcast while I'm making my cup of joe in my Ninja machine. I needed a nice Starbucks cup of coffee so I could stay up for this Phillies game that's on right next to me here as the Phillies are still up 4-0 in the top of the third. And I hear the disappointing fans. Oh, just terrible. Now, I'm waiting to see where these comments are from Joel. And that seems to be a common theme here of the post-game show, is when we look for the Embiid conversation. I feel bad for the guy. I do. I guess maybe he didn't even speak yet, because you would think you would see something at this point. I like to hear from the players during the postgame. I think it just adds so much value to the conversation after the game. Tyrese Maxey said he was glad to hear that James Harden wants to be back, says he's excited to get to work and have a full training camp with him. All right, well, I don't really think that today's the day to think about that at all. Tobias Harris brought up the mental toughness side of things and referenced the Bucks' comeback last night as an example. Yeah, it did seem like when it gets tough at times, as a collective unit, they seem to struggle. And instead of handling the adversity well, it kind of goes in the other direction. My argument with that would be when your primary ball handler looks so non-existent, that's ding, 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 ding. That's your number one issue. Especially when the ball goes to Joel Embiid, and the Miami Heat were very active in making him struggle and making him uncomfortable in that moment. And when nobody else can step up and have the back of your number one guy, it's going to look as ugly as it did. And that's why we saw the predicament that the 76ers were in. But it's deflating. There's no denying that. Even with all the circumstances that I laid out, the fact that you basically rolled over and died and the Miami Heat took your soul, it stings. And I almost wonder, after those two emotional wins in Game 3 and Game 4 to fight back into the series, did it take such a toll on their body that eventually they would run out of gas? That's why if you ever do force a Game 7 after being down 3-0, being down 3-1, you look at how much energy it takes to get back to that spot that sometimes there's nothing left in the tank. And I just wonder, with all of that playing out the way that it did emotionally and physically, did it drain them so much? My problem is, I still can't accept the way that it went down. Even if that is the answer, I'm sorry. You got to show me more will. You got to show me more determination. I shouldn't hear the coach begging for you to fight in a playoff game with your backs against the wall, basically with your season on the line, with just a little bit of time left to go before your season ends. It can't happen. And that's a player problem as a collective group. And Joel is in that group, no doubt about it. I'm just not going to put as much blame on him as others are. You could say both are true. Joel was really going through some things. Back, thumb, concussion, broken orbital bone, the mask. And at times, I would have liked for him to be a little bit cleaner throughout some of the possessions and throughout some of the game. Both are true. But he's the farthest thing from your problem. If you think he's the biggest part of your problem, well then, geez, have fun doing whatever you do in life. He's the farthest thing from your problem. You're not even in this position without that. You need that to even be involved. Then you talk about surrounding pieces and helping him out and putting it together a little bit more, surrounding the big fella. Please. Your MVP's out in the first round. These are the same morons that would say they would want Jokic. So wait, you want the guy that's getting knocked out before Joel Embiid, and he got the hardware due to analytical numbers that doesn't make any sense. Make it make sense. You're allowed to be upset. You're allowed to be in some sort of disgusting feel, if you will. You're allowed to be in your feelings and in your thoughts, but we can at least keep it rational and within logic at the same exact time. He could be better. Oh, no doubt about it. He could be better. And he needs to be better. It goes a long way past that. Yeah, the guy that's consistently getting boned from winning the MVP. Yeah, man, whoo, what a damn shame the Sixers have that. What a damn shame that's what's on your roster. No, the problem is everything surrounding. It's been a tough time trying to get the correct puzzle in place. The pieces are not matching the way that we need them to match. Your first option was a 6'10" point guard that didn't shoot. Didn't work. In theory, James Harden can work if he's willing to play the way that James Harden needs to play. He wasn't willing to do that. We need what we saw. Look, what he did earlier this series to explode and have all those threes and take over in the fourth quarter, that's not even this year's James Harden. That's not even this version of James Harden. So it doesn't even need to be to that. That would be awesome. That would be a blessing to have that once in a blue moon. But we need the 24 and 12. That's what we need from Harden. We need to get downhill, go to the line. We need the aggressive, break down a defender and beat them to the rack. Be aggressive downhill, which opens up everything else surrounding him. But the problem is the guys surrounding him have been an issue too. It wasn't the right puzzle. We knew, let's be fair, before we get to the phones, we knew that this team was not perfectly constructed. What did we say, though? In the NBA, when superstars play well, they make up for deficiencies surrounding your roster. James Harden did not play well, and Joel Embiid was getting triple, doubled, and he had some tougher days at the office with circumstances involved that limited what he was capable of doing at the same time. And teams were so willing to take him out of the game because they knew no one else could hurt you. They were not afraid of Thibault. Go watch it. The closest defender to Matisse Thybulle throughout that game when he was in there. They're not afraid of Maxey. Not afraid of Tobias Harris in these type of games when they recognize that, holy hell, this Sixers team can't buy a damn shot. Hey, have at it. Take all the damn shots you want in the world. It only adds to the equation, too. But Joel needs to be better at the same time. Both can be true. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But we stated that if those guys do what they're capable of doing, you can make up for being thin. And that's true. The problem is your guys that you do have in the thin department stunk. James Harden stunk. And Joel needed help. And that's why we saw the outcome that we saw. Before we go to the phones, I do need to tell you about the new partner here that I'm working with, and it's Freestone Farm CBD. It's my favorite CBD brand because they farm it themselves with all organic inputs, and they offer only the highest quality genetics in their strains and extracts. I've tried a lot of different brands, but honestly, Freestone Farm CBD has been amazing for me. I personally like using it after working out and before I go to bed, as I've been sleeping way better at night. What's even more exciting, our friends at Freestone Farms just unveiled out an all-new strain menu with some awesome CBD at really reasonable prices. Just check out their tropical tasting Bayox that clocks in at 24.1% CBD. All of their premium hemp flower is grown on their Garden State farm with all organic inputs and IPM. Absolutely nothing synthetic from farm to jar. On top of that, use promo code BROADS for $20 off at checkout at FreestoneFarmCBD.com. The link is down below in the description. We will start things off with Jimmy. Jimmy, what's up, man?
Deflating, man. Just what else can I say? Another year, another second round exit, and funny enough, compared to like the second round exit like with the Celtics in 2018, Raptors in 2019, and the Hawks in 2021, oddly enough, this actually feels like the least heartbreaking for me, mainly because I'm just kind of used to it at this point, and it's just a shame that it's even gotten to this point. And even going back to like the series in 2012 against the Celtics, so when we had that great run where they made it to Game 7. I mean, this team, they have different players, but it just seems like in our lifetime, they just can't get over the hump, and that second round's like that Lord of the Rings. You shall not pass.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to the second round for this year, I don't think it's because, we're used to second round exits, so it's not as painful. I just think the circumstances, as I've been alluding to throughout this entire show, I think we just looked at it logically and kind of understood that this is an uphill battle when you have the problems that you do and you fall down 2-0. It's hard to dig yourself out of that. There's a reason why it's a very difficult task to do. And then when you do tie the series up, losing Game 5, historically speaking, when you look at the percentages of how many teams who win Game 5 end up closing out the series, we kind of recognize where this team was, how thin they were, that it's going to be a super tough task. So it's not as if, because they keep losing in the second round. No, each team's different. Each playoff run has their own storyline. Each squad has their own stories to it, and I just think that we were more prepared of understanding where this current team was heading into tonight, where, maybe the expectations were a little bit different than what we saw in Toronto in 2019, where you had Sports Illustrated covers of J.J. Redick, Jimmy Butler, Tobias, Ben, Joel. Not that people wrote this team off and didn't give them a chance whatsoever, but I think it's more about the expectations of where they were after Game 5 more than anything else.
Yeah, man, I'm just hoping to use a reference from other sports. It seems like right now we're kind of like the Washington Capitals before 2018. And I still think there's a 2018 Capitals type run for the Sixers out there. We just got to keep on hoping and got to have faith that we can get a better bench. And, but I also just want to bring this up, like this idea that the best player is always needs to shoulder 100% of the blame. Like it's always on him. It's number one on him. That is such a toxic mindset. The idea that Embiid is 100% to blame, or when the Flyers could never win the cup when he was the captain, that Drew was always 100% to blame, and people blaming Harper 100% for the Phillies not making the playoffs. Like, what do you want him to do? You want Embiid to score 50 points on 2 broken legs? You want Harper to hit 70 home runs and bat 350? You want Drew to score 200 points a year like Wayne Gretzky? Like, how about you just focus on the other guys who didn't show up instead of the guy who's literally the franchise player who always shows up no matter what?
Yeah, I mean, in basketball, it always goes to the best player, but I think that's unfair. Majority of people just look at the top guy and say, well, they didn't win, therefore we're blaming him, and he's the reason why it didn't happen. Which, for me, excuse me, if I can speak and get out words, considering that is my job and that is my duty, I should be able to do it better than I just did. Anyway, I can't do that today. That's not where I go. I'm disappointed in the entire team right now. I'm disappointed in the Sixers organization right now, but I'm not just looking at one person. I've been involved in many locker rooms. I've been involved in many different situations when it comes to a team failing and coming up short, and there's a lot more to it than just that, so I can't get there. Now, you mentioned the Washington Capitals. There was a time where the Sidney Crosby-led Penguins and the Penguins in general would take the soul of the Washington Capitals, what felt like every single year, until eventually they were able to get through. Well, what happened? They eventually got through. That's my point where I'm with you. It is fine to be devastated. It is fine to be down in the dumps. It is fine to be mad that they can't get out of the second round. Let's not act like they can't get out of the first round. Let's not act like they're not 1 game away, 2 games away. Like there's something to this. This isn't a puzzle where we have to strip it all down and start all over and we got to reshape everything. It's like, no. There's something to this. It's figuring out where to go from this point and what buttons to push. You're not in a disastrous spot. You're in a frustrating spot. Those are 2 different circumstances. And what you can't do is have such an emotional knee-jerk reaction that you end up doing something stupidly and making a wrong decision just because you're emotionally reacting to being really harsh in your feels in the current moment. You're allowed to be. But this is why you don't make the decisions right after a loss. You lose game 6 and today's not the day you make all the decisions on the roster for next year. All right? It's tough. It's hard. It's difficult. It's unsettling. It's uneasy. And we should be mad. I am mad. I am very, very upset with what we just witnessed. There's something to this. And there's something to this because you have the big fella. Because you have the big fella. But it just stinks to see him out there this depleted. Because my man, he's broken. This guy is giving us every inch of his body, every inch of his soul, every inch of every little thing that he has. He's giving it to this fan base. It's crazy to think about what he's going through right now. Let's go back to the phones. Hello, good evening. You're on Broads Media.
Hey, Broads, what's going on? It's Al from Toronto, man.
What's going on?
What's up, bro? I was honestly, Joel Embiid, I've gained so much more respect for him, and he really has given it all. I totally have nothing to say about him, but I was just upset with the lack of effort. It almost felt like they gave up at the end, and if it wasn't for that Shake Milton and 1-3 that he got, kind of built up a little bit more fight in the other guys, because I saw Harden and everyone else just off to the side trying to coast off and just write off the game, but Shake was just fighting till the end. That sparked that little 7-0 run at the end, and that's the thing that was most disappointing, because Shake Milton was playing like he's the max contract guy out there, and everyone was just kind of, dodging and just tucking their tail kind of thing.
Yeah, it did feel that way for sure, and that's why it's hard to swallow, no doubt about it. Look, if you go down and you go down swinging, it may hurt more. Ironically enough, I'll bring up the Toronto series from a few years back, and I appreciate the cause. I was going to give you, I wanted to get your thoughts on one more thing, but it's okay. No worries about it. I appreciate the phone call. Now, when it comes to Toronto, it hurts more. It's more painful. It stings when you lose the way that you do, when it's a quadruple doink, and you talk about some of the shot clock violations that happen in Toronto. And trust me, I mean, that is so much more harder to swallow when it goes down the way that it does. But there is still more appreciation to the effort and to the games. While right now in this season, they kind of just rolled over and died. And it really kind of goes to, ironically enough, too, when we talk about the MVP trophy, it's Joel Embiid or nothing. And the reason why you brought in James Harden was because you were supposed to have a little bit of a fallback. Not that I needed to demand him to take over every single game and give me 30-something points and, be this elite superstar. But I needed way more than 9 shots. I need way more than 0 in the second half in a closeout situation for the Miami Heat. That's where I need more from James Harden. So if Embiid is out of it and taken out of the game by the opponent, you have zip. You cannot be built that way. And you saw, look, let's look at the Brooklyn Nets. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. Kevin Durant was getting shut down in the fourth quarter. Kevin Durant was getting abused. Kevin Durant looked horrible in some of those stretches against the Boston Celtics to the point where they got swept. Does that mean Kevin Durant blows? Does that mean you don't want Kevin Durant? Does that mean Kevin Durant is a horrible player who, by the way, only won his championship around Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green? Even though he won a finals MVP, look at who we won it with compared to what it's been like without those players around him. You need help. You desperately need a team and a collective unit of guys who can help out and mold a professional brand of basketball. They don't have that. They don't have even close to anything, really, when Joel Embiid isn't involved. Whether that's from strategic side with the other team taking him away, daring everybody else to do something. Whether it's Embiid just having an off night on his own, which does occur. Losing the way that they did, even though it seems to be a trend right now. The Mavericks, the Warriors. Look at the Memphis Warriors score the other night. It's 50 points. They're losing by 50. Memphis has over 100 points without Ja in the third quarter. Crazy things happen. But the trend is it happened 2 games in a row where they looked so damn flat and defeated once the other team went on a run instead of fighting back and crawling as hard as they needed to. Other than the first run when it was 7-0, and then the Sixers responded with a 7-0 run of their own to tie the game up 7-7. Other than that, whenever Miami did their surge, it was brutal for sure. Back to the phones we go. Hello, you are on Broads Media.
Hey, bro, I think that we got to trade James Harden. Like, what was that performance?
Well, he's going to be here next year.
Like, well, then we got to do something to make this guy play hard in the big games. Like, I'm not saying that we have to be the reason that we win, but you can't be the reason that we get blown out by a conference rival in the second round.
Yeah, I mean, this is what you have to do. You have to hope and pray that the reason why the deficiencies were so glaring throughout the James Harden process is this hamstring is a serious problem, and it really is hindering him big time and limiting what he's capable of doing. That's what you need to do. You need to pray that that's the case. Look, I don't think that you can't win with a James Harden on your roster, with a healthy Joel Embiid and other pieces surrounding this two tandem that I just mentioned, depending on what Daryl Morey does with it, Tobias Harris, and what other talent he comes in. It's not like having James Harden here is the most complete disaster ever in the history of sports. I think if you collectively make moves this offseason to accomplish the goal of having better talent surrounding Embiid and Harden, it's not something that you can't build around. But yeah, I mean, it is concerning that he gave us this effort in a Game 6, no doubt about it.
Like, I just thought we got out of this whole star not showing up situation when we got rid of Ben, because Ben did the same thing last year. And now it's just to have it happen again, it just really pees me off.
Well, if I ever thought of James Harden, once we saw James Harden, it would be foolish to have an expectation that it would never happen. We saw James Harden this year, right? We witnessed what he was doing. You had it written down in stone that he'd show up for some of the games. He wouldn't show up for other of the games. And that's the version of James Harden that we got this season. At some point, that should have been highlighted on your notepad that was inevitably going to occur because there was enough of a sample size with this team to know that this happens. So he'll give you an exciting game where he gives you 28 and 12 assists. He'll give you those games where he gives you 24 and 15 assists. And then he'll give you those nights where he shoots 3 for 11, has 11 points, doesn't really beat guys off the dribble, and he finishes with 6 assists. These games, this was already known that you would get that in the 7-game series. It's just, does that night fall on a night where Danny Green has 7 threes, or does that fall on a night where Niang, Danny, and Tyrese Maxey collectively with Tobias Harris have four threes total from the floor? Right? Those are totally different situations. Because, for example, Jimmy Butler gave you 40. Jimmy Butler lost that game. So if that game happened to fall on a night where you still won because others as a unit collectively stepped up and you won the basketball game, it's easier to sleep at night. If it happens on a night where other guys are painfully brutal too, well, then, of course, it gets diagnosed. But he's definitely the number one culprit of disappointment tonight. Even though there's a lot of areas to go, there's a lot of blame when you look at James Harden and think about the miserable effort that he provided today. It's just, you've been around too long. You know the narrative around you. You know what the national storylines are on what it's like for you in second-round games and when you think about coming up short and you don't even look to be aggressive. I'd rather you take 18, 19, 20, 21 shots and make 6, make 5, make 4, right? The mindset of going downhill, attacking, getting to the rack, missing. I'll take that any day. Tyrese Maxey misses shots, but he's got the right idea in mind. I mean, Tobias missed a couple layups, which was brutal. Maxey gets to the rack with the speed. He leaves it short on a mini layup, missing bunnies. But I'm not questioning Maxey's thoughts and thought process of taking the floor for a playoff game. You can have the right intentions and just suck on that night with executing and making or missing shots. At times, that's Maxey. Where Maxey has a bad day, it's not because he's not trying or he's giving up and he's not engaged. He's just missing and getting exposed due to his size and with a lot to learn in this league. That's my point with James Harden is you've been around the block, dude. You're looked at as one of the best 75 players to ever play the damn sport. This cannot happen from you. You're not learning anymore. Now, there is something to be said about switching teams and changing cities and playing a new style with a center, a dominant center, the way that Joel Embiid plays the game. There are parts of the game that you do have to recognize is different for a primary ball handler in terms of making zero shots in the second half with your backs against the wall, though. And I don't even count that second shot. He really took one shot in that second half in my eyes. One shot. That's night and day from being aggressive and missing. I don't know how that even happens. It's honestly impossible. It's impossible. That's how horrible it is what he did, is it's impossible. All right, let's keep hearing from the people. Hello, welcome. You're on with Broads.
Broads, what up?
What's up?
This is Anwar from South Philly, man. I ain't talked to you in a while, man. I hope the family's doing good. I hope the dog's back to 100%.
Yes, the dog is doing great now, back to her normal self. Almost too crazy. Where I'm like, yo, can you tone it down a little bit? You know what I'm saying? You're looking at my face too much. But thank you so much for reaching out about that. I appreciate that.
No problem, man. But before I give my spill, I just want to ask you a question.
Okay.
What do you think about our off-season player development, and do our players take their work ethic serious in the off-season?
Yeah, I think they do. Here's my issue with player development, which is actually a great thing to bring up considering how many times we heard these undrafted players, Duncan Robinson, the list goes on, and what happens with Miami. Even though they're an outlier for sure on how they get things done with their culture down there, this is the problem with Doc Rivers. While he didn't lose you this series strategically with this and that, I mean, he was very limited and capped with what this situation provided him. But he doesn't play Paul Reed. He doesn't play Bassey. He doesn't play these guys, Isaiah Joe. So when you are a little bit handcuffed in these moments, you're throwing guys in there with zero experience when they could at least have 20% experience and learn and have them grow in the regular season, where when you do need them, maybe there's a little more meat to the bones, but because you never, ever, 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 ever play them whenever you are desperate and need them. Not that that's the difference in winning or losing a series, but they're nowhere even close to being ready because they don't even touch the floor at all through the regular season. That's a big knock on me for Doc Rivers.
I perfectly understand that. I get that. And because I just like, you can tell when certain players, like, they're in the culture of the organization and they just got the dog mentality, like they want to be there. It's just like I was just going by us looking flat the last couple of games, like, damn, like, do we really want it? Like, like they're just not trying hard enough. Like, because me, I'm just the type of guy, like, I'm with you with the ship floating and sinking. I'm not switching up. I'm just going to ride with you the whole year. And I don't change my mind about things. But I just think we need to do better with, how we manage the players on the floor, and our players, they have to want it. Like, you know what I mean? Because I feel like we are better than the second round. And it's like, I know we're better than what we shown. But, I mean,
yeah, I like that you just brought up the second round thing. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for chiming into the show. When you're in the second round, you're not playing teams that blow. First round, Brooklyn Nets with Jared Dudley. A couple years ago when Kelly Olynyk is on the Miami Heat, and that's the version of the Heat that you see. When you play those type of first round squads, it's different. When you get to the second round, you lose to the eventual champions in the Toronto Raptors. You lose to teams, well, when you lost to the Boston Celtics, Ben Simmons was hurt in the bubble, and that was a weird season in its own right. When you get to the second round, well, all, I don't think this Miami Heat team is some sensational elite team by any means. They're a good team, and the way that I labeled it is when you look at those final 4 teams in the East, the Bucks, the Celtics, the Heat, the Sixers, any one of these teams could make it out. It's not crazy to think any one of those teams can make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and then make it to the NBA Finals. There's this tier, right? It's not the Golden State Warriors winning 73 regular season games. They're all within this same tier to a degree. Some are better than others, but it's not this outrageous, distinct, obvious separation between all of these teams. There's ones that may have a little bit more depth. What is the difference? I'm not going to downplay the difference of how important that is when you do get this tight of a matchup, because you can see one team is now moving on to the next round while the other is going home and starting to golf because they were so thin, the Sixers. So it does matter for sure. But the separation of these teams are not so damn monstrous where there's something to that. You're losing in the second round in 7. You're losing the second round in 6 while Embiid was hurt the first 2 games, which does a bit change the storyline in my eyes. There's something to this, but it's where do you go from here? Because it is make or break time for some of these decisions. And to be honest with you, I know Daryl Morey is getting criticized for certain things. When it comes to NBA circles, you do have one of the best in the league in your president of basketball operations role. And this is where he needs to shine. This is where he needs to step up with the bright lights. All right, so it does look like Embiid is speaking now. Embiid asked whether they need more tough physical players like Marcus Smart, Drew Holiday. He said for sure. Embiid then went on a couple minutes of praising P.J. Tucker. Yeah, I mean, Matisse Thybulle is a defender, even though he doesn't really even change the game defensively at all. But he's not an in-your-face guy. He's not a screw-you guy. He's not an annoying guy that you can't stand playing against. I mean, he might get in your grill here and there, but, you know, you talk about these game changers defensively, Pat Beverly, P.J. Tucker, they annoy you when they make it living hell. With Matisse Thybulle, I mean, he gives you more nothing than he does actually something. So I don't disagree with that. Joel Embiid was asked whether he still has faith in the front office. At some point, you got to stop looking at the coaches or the front office. The players got to do their jobs. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Embiid asked about Tobias Harris's mental toughness comments. When you talk about a physicality standpoint, they dominated us on the glass. They got what they wanted. I think that mental toughness could be a part of it, but definitely the physicality wasn't there. So it looks like he's saying because they were getting abused the way that they were by the way the Miami Heat were playing, at some point it kind of took over that, all right, they keep doing this. They keep getting what they wanted. After getting what they want for a couple of games, after the couple of quarters, I should say, of what happened in Game 5, and then you see the same tendencies happen in Game 6. You know, I know it's easy to say, well, you never give up. You play until the end. I got you. I'm just trying to talk this through on why it got the way that it got from Joel Embiid's perspective. And it seems if I'm reading between the lines and reading what he's trying to put down is, you know, after so much time of getting beat up physically, then it ends up taking a toll. And that's why you get to where you get. Embiid was asked about Jimmy Butler's post-game comments. I still don't know how we let him go. Well, the organization wanted Ben Simmons, and at that time, I didn't have a problem with it. Now, with hindsight, of course, would I like to go back? No doubt. At the time, though, I can't act as if I hated it. You lose Game 7 the way that you do on the road. You don't fire Brett Brown then. You don't fire Brett Brown. Now, for sure, I mean, you want to say that, oh, yes, you do. You don't, but okay. At the time, you don't. Things change over time. At that specific time, you don't. At that specific time, I'm not giving up on Ben Simmons for Jimmy Butler. I'm not. Things look different now, and if I could go back, I would. But I'm not someone who's just going to act like hindsight is so easy to go back on. And, you know, Brett Brown was getting called to be fired every single day, no matter what year it was, so just like Doc Rivers is getting fired every day by everybody. That's just the nature of the position. Sometimes it's logical, and I think they made the decision at the logical time to do it. And after that Raptor series, it wasn't. But now, looking back, sure. I mean, it was a painful thing at the time. Or a painful thing now when you look back, but at the time, it was a little bit different. Let's see. Joel says he's going to have to sit and talk it through with everyone. But the last time I checked, I definitely need surgery for the thumb. That doesn't surprise me whatsoever. Not even a little bit does that. I'm surprised that he's not going to need anything for his face either, to be honest with you. after he got hit in the face again with the ball in Game 5 and he goes down. This guy's going through hell. It's wild. It really is to think about what type of physical pain he must have been battling out there at an NBA playoff level. Crazy. Back to the phones we go. Hello. You're on Rhodes Media.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, so unfortunately, I'm one of those guys that's probably going to overreact, but I haven't been a big fan of Doc Rivers all year. I thought I'd give him a chance, but I thought his weaknesses kind of showed today.
It did?
His poor play calling,
No.
poor rotation, not playing.
He did not lose this game today.
I have to disagree.
Doc Rivers lost the game today? Not James Harden, not Tobias, not the poor shooting from Niang. No, Doc Rivers lost the game today.
I thought that he did not really put them in positions to succeed.
No.
And I'm going to go by, yes. I mean, if you look at the third quarter, how many times did they just dribble the ball down and then they kind of passed it to Embiid at the elbow with like 3 seconds left and he has to jack up a shot? That was like the entire third quarter. And then somehow when Shake Milton comes in, they start like running some kind of offense, some movement, and they get a little spark. I'm like, where was this play calling? Why are they not like running some plays?
So hold on a second. You're demanding them in a playoff game in the second half to run offenses through Shake Milton, and that's the difference in winning this game or not?
No,
you see
not
what I'm saying here?
Per se.
So that shows me. What does that tell me? If we're now screaming that we didn't go to Shake Milton early enough, that means Harden sucked, Tobias sucked, Maxey wasn't good enough. So you're telling me your first three options were so poor. I don't know what coach wins by running offenses through Shake Milton. I would despise a head coach running an offense through a guy that barely played all year in a closeout game. Like that, it's just what you're doing is you're reaching for options. Your players who you needed to play well didn't play well. And then you just naturally move the blame to the coach. I'm not a Doc Rivers guy. If he gets fired, okay. I mean, I'm not having a parade because guess what? The next coach comes in here and then within 1 year, you're going to be screaming that coach needs to be fired. And then whenever the next coach comes in, you'll be saying that guy needs to get fired. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast here. Brett Brown needs to get fired. Doc Rivers needs to get fired. Now Gabe Kapler had to get fired. Now Joe Girardi needs to get fired. There's just a trend here where the coach, manager, coach. The team wasn't playing well enough. The guys did not play well enough. Doc Rivers was not perfect. Doc Rivers did not have all the answers. No doubt, Doc Rivers is not some coach that I love. His name speaks louder than the actual production you get from a coach. But you're absolutely overblowing the fact that Doc Rivers lost you this basketball game. The fact that you go there before you go to James Harden, before you go to Tobias, before you go to the actual players, that makes me sickening. It makes me sick. That is sickening to me. That's foolish. So to answer the beginning of your question or your statement, I might be one of those ones overreacting. Yes, you were. Yes, you were. You were one of those guys. And I don't even love Doc. Definitely not. And I didn't even love Brett. Definitely not. But come on now. Did you see the way this team played the last two games? And then don't tell me, well, it's on the coach. When you're 14, yes. When you get paid $40 million a year, James Harden should be ready to play because James Harden is ready to play. Tobias should be ready to play because Tobias is ready to play. Stop it. That's garbage and Bush League to think that Eric Spoelstra is in the locker room with this motivational miracle speech when Team USA went out and beat the Russians. Come on now. They know what they need to do. Either you're prepared or you're not prepared. Either you're ready to compete or you're not ready to compete. And they weren't ready to compete. That's on the players. From an individual standpoint, that's on the players. All right, what do we got next? Hello.
Hey, so a lot of questions going on with this team right now. And I wanted to touch base on what you said earlier in the show about Twitter and how everyone has a different take going on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, what is the main thing you want to see being tackled in this next season? Because I myself have like a million questions going on. I have Bradley Beal in my mind. I have Doc being fired for D'Antoni. It's just so much going on. I just want maybe just one thing that maybe as like a fan base we should keep in mind as a goal.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely my answer is one answer, but it's dictated around a couple different moves. It's who are you surrounding Joel Embiid and James Harden with? So whether that is a Bradley Beal, you look at Tobias Harris, the moves that are made there. I mean, obviously that's a big chunk of change, and what Daryl Morey has to do to get creative in that area is something that, is a Daryl Morey type move, if you will. But I think it's who are you surrounding the big man and James Harden with? Because James is going to be here and Embiid is going to be here. What do you do from there? So obviously that is a collective unit of moves for a lot of different reasons. Oh, and Maxey, of course. I can't leave out Maxey. Those are your three guys, which is a good three to have. As frustrating as Harden is, and I cannot stand what he did today. And I mean, I am sick. I don't know if my emotions have poured out enough towards my hatred of the James Harden experience tonight enough, but I am absolutely pissed off with James Harden. Looking at next year, though, with your question, which is very difficult to do tonight, when you have those three, that's not a bad spot to be. But what do you do from there is what I'm looking at. So, all right, that's where I'm at. As the Phillies have a 5-1 lead for all of you tuning into that as well as listening to the show with Bomer up with a 3-1 count. It's Philly season now. I guess that's where we're at. Is he going yard? Oh, off the wall. Oh, man. All right. So with all that said, I think over this last hour, I got out my thoughts here after the game. Andre wants to chime in. So why don't we give Andre an opportunity, and he'll be our last caller of the show before we wrap things up. What's going on, Andre? Hello.
Broads.
What's up, man?
What's going on, man? How are you?
I've seen better days.
I know, man. I can feel it. Just one question for you, Broads. Do you think, next year, we should put, less energy in the whole MVP conversation, discussion, that whole thing? Because I feel like it felt like, especially at a crucial time in the series, you're down 3-2, and one of the main topics was, did Joel get screwed out of an MVP?
Well, the only reason why it was being discussed is that's when the league hands out the trophies, which is a stupid time to give out regular season awards. They should either do it before the postseason begins, which makes the most sense because then everyone's skewed on the thoughts if it's handed out after the postseason. But to do it when they do it is more of a flaw on the NBA. And, I mean, that's what you talk about during that time. When the award's being given out and you're seeing numbers and Coach of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, naturally, as a society, when that's being handed out, that's not our fault for bringing it up then. That's more of the league's fault on when they even hand it out to begin with.
Yeah, no doubt. It's the league's fault. But I mean, it's just as players, right? It's next year, should Joel have that mindset to just put the MVP out of your mind and just focus on winning a championship? Because last game, when you're down 3-2 and Joel's giving, a 2-3 minute answer about the MVP, it's at that point, he's dude, we're in the second round. We got to focus on the task at hand here.
Yeah, but he was asked that question, Andre, and I have to wholeheartedly disagree with you on this one. I don't think Joel Embiid looked the way that he did because he was upset that he didn't win the MVP. I think that's a silly narrative. It's a first take Stephen A. Smith narrative. It's Fox Sports with Skip Bayless. Those are the type of guys that draw that out for drama and all sorts of debates. He was asked the question, he answered the question, and it is what it is. Everyone knew weeks ago when you look at the betting odds and where Joel Embiid was, he wasn't going to win the trophy. If you look at the numbers and the amount of voters that went in the other direction, I mean, it was pretty obvious and clear who was going to win it. So just because it was announced, it doesn't mean that he looked that way because he needs surgery on his hand. He has a broken face. He was concussed and he's battling injuries. That's why he looked bad. That's why he looked off. That's why he looked the way that he did at certain points. Now, he probably had a bad day too. Both can be true. It was just an off night because even guys that are healthy have off nights. So it's a combination of a lot of things. But to act as if Joel Embiid is so hurt and so sad about not winning the MVP when it was obvious he wasn't going to win it anyway, and that's why he had a bad night without having without adding in the physical pain that he's suffering at the time, that's just crazy to me. That's all. It's crazy to me that the broadcast went down the path that they did during that time. And that's kind of how I see it. Oh, man, it's always weird and strange when the season ends. It's a very tough feeling. I drank too much coffee, so I'll probably be up until 3 a.m. anyway, which sort of was the goal, considering I do have some Phillies action to watch and some Phillies action to cover, as it's now 6-1. I smell a World Series. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me tonight. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button as well. I greatly appreciate it. If you're looking to buy tickets for any event out there, you can utilize the promo code BROADS at SeatGeek's checkout page for $20 off. That eliminates all the fees. That eliminates the fees at the end, so you get free parking or you get free booze when you go into the stadium or ballpark. Promo code BROADS. Definitely utilize that. And lastly, TikTok, @BroadsMedia, Twitter, @BroadsMedia. Hit the follow button there. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you next time.